Okay, welcome everyone. Today we're going to, my name is Elaine O, and we're going to be talking about whether or not ESG is an attack on Bitcoin. So real quick, we'll go down the row and have everyone introduce themselves, starting with Troy.
Hi, I'm Troy Cross. I teach philosophy, and I'm also a fellow at the Bitcoin Policy Institute and a longtime Bitcoiner.
I'm Jaime Leverton. I'm the CEO of Hut 8 Mining, which is one of North America's oldest, largest publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies. Oh, thanks, guys.
Hi, I'm Greg Beard. I'm the CEO of Stronghold Digital Mining, which is the only environmentally beneficial Bitcoin mining concern.
The only.
Only.
That's a big statement, only.
Marty Bent, founder of TFTC, and sit on the board at Cathedra, and I'm part of 1031 as well.
Okay, thank you. For those of you who were here yesterday, we heard from Peter Thiel, who called ESG a hate factory and compared it to the Communist Party of China. So I'll start with Jaime and Greg. You guys are CEOs of publicly traded companies. Do you feel like ESG is an attack on your guys' companies? Do
you want to start?
Please, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I think it's absolutely hysterical how we use all three letters to describe what is really an attack centered entirely around the E of ESG. I do think the conversation, if we're going to have an ESG narrative, it needs to be much more encompassing of the entire scope of ESG, why all three letters are equally important. From an E perspective, I think the environment is an existential threat to everybody on the planet. I think it's something that we all need to be taking seriously. I think it should be affecting equally every industry. It shouldn't be, I feel like for some reason Bitcoin mining is a lightning rod and we're being held to a standard that's completely different from any other industry. And so that's certainly the challenge that we are facing right now.
Yeah, so I can't, and I agree more. We're absolutely under attack, but it's not going to stop because it's an effective attack. I think if you see what the industry is doing, there are very few that are in the Bitcoin mining industry that don't aspire publicly to be greener and to reduce their carbon footprint. So that's a benefit of the focus. I think you said it well, in that everyone's focused on the negative aspects of what we do. But if you're mining Bitcoin, like the great defense is, we've created the largest decentralized computing network in the world that will decrease the friction on transactions for the world, which that endangers banks and endangers the incumbents that own the trillions of dollars of revenue that those industries benefit from today. So of course it's an easy thing to attack, but I think you have to couple the cost, the environmental cost, with the societal benefit. I think we've done a pretty average job at describing that thus far, but that'll change. I think on the power side, I really believe that Bitcoin mining is a great avenue to replace grid level batteries. So what isn't talked about in ESG or renewable energy, who doesn't like renewable energy? I'm a fan, but we have to acknowledge that the more renewable energy you have on your grid, the more expensive the power becomes for the constituents. And so I think on average, the most renewable grids in the world have power costs that are 3 times those that don't. And so that's a societal cost that we wouldn't talk about. It's really regressive. A part of the reason why that is when you install solar and wind, those are intermittent sources of power. If the sun isn't shining, you can't use it. If the wind isn't blowing, it's not usable. So you need to have, you need to double your capacity, and that's really expensive. So a way people are trying to solve that is with grid-sized batteries, which themselves are hugely environmentally damaging, and they're not even effective. A battery for a grid might last a couple of hours. So my belief is that over time, Bitcoin mining will become more vertically integrated, meaning power plant owners will end up mining their own Bitcoin and use that power to effectively serve as a spinning reserve battery for when the grid needs it, when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. So it's much more That would be a much more economic thing to do, which for constituents, power users, that would help keep the cost of power down because, as we all know, you double the amount of infrastructure, you're going to have to dramatically increase the price. This is a really progressive way to keep the cost down, and we're just only beginning to see that potential benefit today.
Okay, well, we'll take a step back. I mean, ESG is a social construct, and like everyone is, pro-environment. So, where is the attack coming from? Like, who are the attackers? And I'll open this up to Marty and Troy. Like, who is actually using this as a weapon to attack Bitcoin?
I mean, just broadly speaking, ESG is an attack on free markets, and Bitcoin is just collateral damage. And like, Bitcoin is arguably the freest market in the world, and so by extension, ESG is going to attack that. These people don't care about the environment, social justice.
Who are these people?
Well, so capital allocators. I mean, BlackRock is...
Larry Fink, okay.
Larry Fink is the godfather of ESG. He also happens to be the largest asset manager in the world, so he passively gets dollars that he's able to invest on behalf of tens of millions of people to acquire stock, to get positions on board, and then to force behaviors on companies. So it's multifaceted. I mean, if you can't control free markets, you need to find a mechanism to do that. I think ESG is that mechanism. And in the fund world, it's a great meme to make fees on. There's a lot of people trying to sell products at a premium because it's ESG certified. But again, at the end of the day, this is an attack by quintillionaires who have access to the Fed window, who are able to take that money and then try to force behaviors on markets. They say it's a free market reaction to the challenges of our day. This is how Larry Fink positions it. However, it's not a free market reaction. He's getting money passively. He helped the Fed directly execute on its bond purchasing program last year. He is connected to the money spigot. And so it's not a free market at all, even though they want you to believe it is.
So it's powers that be trying to consolidate their power, and they're using this as an excuse.
Yeah, I mean, it's they're playing to people's feelings. Like Jamie said, everybody's focused on the E, nobody focuses on the S and the G. I mean, a great example of this is California. It has demand for 600 million barrels of oil a year, and they've shut down their oil industry and state, and now they import their oil from Ecuador, where they're tearing up the Amazon, and then they're shipping that over shipping containers that are more likely to have disasters than a pipeline. And so what you see in that particular situation is people virtue signaling, like, oh, we're not going to produce oil here in California, but we'll export it to the Amazon where we can't see it, and then we'll have it come back here. And it's this big virtue signal. Like, that's the thing. If you're thinking from first principles, it's not actually helping the environment or social governance around the world. It's a big LARP, and people are being extremely hypocritical.
And then let's send our garbage abroad as well.
Yeah.
While we're at it.
I don't disagree with any of this, anything that's been said so far. But I think we have to distinguish between different things that get called ESG. That word in this community, or I should say the Bitcoin Twitter community, it's like talismanic. It's like you're summoning the devil when you say ESG. ESG, and then it means different things. And some of them are attacks, and I think some of them are not attacks. There's, let's say, different financial organizations that want to profit off from their own metrics that they then sell privately. That might be a way of scamming people. It might be a way of protecting vested interests against an upcoming competitor by classifying that as not ESG, and so it saves the banking system. It might be, it's also the SEC trying to come to principles, and so there's another way which maybe a regulator doesn't understand the subtleties of how we mine and how that relates to emissions. We have incredible subtleties in the effects we have on the environment that are going to get lost in their cheesy metrics. Like so much of life, when you try to come up with metric systems, you're going to miss the complete narrative and the reality of causation. But there's also just mom and pop who want to invest the way they want to invest in accordance with their values, and that's just the free market. I think of capitalism as just a free market in capital. allocating capital as you see fit. And there's a lot of people, like 75% of the population, who think that climate change is real. And there's a lot of capital represented by those people. And I don't think that's an attack on Bitcoin. That's just capitalism. And I don't think that Bitcoin is in any way in tension with those underlying values that those mom and pops have. That's their retirement. That's what they worked really hard to save. It's their right to spend as they so choose. And Bitcoin is an ESG investment. As we've been saying, it's on the S and the G, but it's on the E as well. As you just heard on the previous panel, if you're concerned about climate change, Bitcoin mining represents an incredibly hopeful development in technology that finances a transition that we are not going to finance in any other way. And that's a story we have to tell and vet.
So last month, the SEC proposed some new rules where publicly traded companies need to disclose their carbon emissions. So is this ultimately going to be beneficial to publicly traded Bitcoin companies, or are they just like missing the mark on that?
As a publicly traded Bitcoin company, much like Greg, I think in general, we're in favor of clarity. We're in favor of regulation that brings clarity, that helps drive adoption, that allows us to disclose in a way that's meaningful and auditable. And if this gets us closer to that, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I have no complaint with being required to disclose what our emissions are, and we can voluntarily disclose what our benefits are.
Exactly.
But that's sort of the purpose of government, is to say, hey, why don't you just tell the truth about what you're doing? And hey, we're proud of what we're doing, proud to disclose it. I think in conjunction with saying, hey, we put X number of tons of carbon into the air. At the same time we're doing that, we're removing thousands of tons of very toxic waste substances from Pennsylvania that clean up the rivers, lakes, and make places inhabitable again. So it's having the government force a disclosure. Okay, I think we voluntarily can disclose other things that would explain the benefits of what we're doing. That way, it's not a one-sided argument.
And I think it needs to be a level playing field. So having the clarity and having us all be in a position where we put our numbers out, we put our metrics out, we have a conversation, and it's more legitimized than an environment where you can just kind of put out a headline and you're not necessarily held accountable to it in a meaningful, auditable way.
I don't like government forcing anybody to do anything. So like these disclosures, again, we're playing into this narrative. It's all about control. No matter, at the end of the day, they don't care how much green renewable energy we use. I mean, you just saw last week one of the lead climate scientists came out and said, I don't care if Bitcoin miners are using 70% renewable energy. They're taking that electricity from better resources. Like, these people don't care about Bitcoin's energy use. They don't like Bitcoin, the fact that they can't control it. They want to shut that down. And as an industry, why I've been very vocal about this for many years is we could be walking into a very bad situation if we play along with the ESG narrative and we bend the knee and we say, all right, here's our carbon emissions. And it's like, what's next? What's next after those disclosures? Is it, all right, now you need 50% to be, you need this particular energy mix. And then it's, again, forcing behaviors on an industry that's supposed to be a free market. I mean, Bitcoin is doing incredible things for the environment and energy efficiency by itself. We don't need to be forced to do anything. And the more we cater to these people, the more control they have over us at the end of the day. And I don't think we should be catering.
But Jamie and Greg, is that a realistic response? Can you just give them the finger and?
They already have control. The
It
issue
is not,
they already
as a
have
public
control.
company, a realistic
This is what Bitcoin is, though. We're part of like a revolution. Like we're taking, like that's it's a fiat mindset to go along with that. Like Bitcoin is like bringing us back to objective truth, and this stuff is not objective truth. ESG is not objective truth. It's an attempt to create a metric system on a system filled with people with different values who have subjective values. You can't create a metric system for that, and they're trying to force that on the industry, and it's not good at the end of the day. I agree. I'm an environmentalist. I want to be as energy efficient as possible. I want to be as clean as possible. But again, this isn't about the environment or social justice. This is about slowly pushing us into a corner where they can control us and poke and prod and say, do this, do that. Bitcoin will be fine, but I worry about the North American mining industry as we go down this ESG narrative.
So, back in the real world where there's regulations and, regulators and stuff, what is a more realistic response? Because, you can't tell the SEC to have fun staying poor, because,
I mean, I think.
Well, Marty can. He's not a public CEO.
I don't know how public companies will deal with it, but I think we have to think about what we want for investors in Bitcoin, for holders who want to know that the mining companies that they invest in reflect their own values. And I think that's our obligation to people who have that desire for us. They basically want a product from us, which is clean hash rate, green hash rate. I know Marty thinks there's no such thing.
What is clean? What is green? What is renewable?
This isn't something that I want the SEC to define, and it's not something I want various Wall Street firms to define. It's something I want investors to define. So we disagree. I don't know if you've noticed in this country, we have some disagreements. There's some disagreements. We disagree about climate change, but we disagree also about the energy future and markets. And as you know, it's complex. Some people believe in a solar and wind future despite the intermittency problems. Other people are sold on nuclear. Other people believe in carbon capture and storage. We're not going to settle that debate on this stage, and we're not going to settle it within the Bitcoin community. Instead, what we need to do is provide a mechanism for people to take their beliefs and values and invest accordingly, right? So we shouldn't, we don't decide what the energy future is and then tell it to be. That's totally against the spirit of Bitcoin. It's totally against the spirit of Bitcoin. Instead, I'd like to see a segmented market in hash rate. And the idea that I came up with Andrew Bailey is that if you, as a Bitcoin holder, you provide incentive to mine. You keep the price of Bitcoin higher than it would be if you weren't holding. And that's incentivizing mining. And you can see how much mining you're incentivizing by taking your percentage of all Bitcoin and looking the equivalent percentage of all hash rate. That's the hash rate you're responsible for incentivizing. And what could you do to offset that? Not carbon offset, but incentive offset. You could mine the same amount of all mining that you incentivize. And if you did that, you would be driving up difficulty by entering the market as a miner in a way that you're invisible to all miners' balance sheets. You're making their block reward worth more, but you're making it cost more hashes for them to get that block reward in equal amounts, so it's in equilibrium. So the idea is, if you want to hold green Bitcoin, you buy hash rate in accordance with the total amount of holdings you have. And then the only carbon that you're responsible for is the carbon that you mine, or the hash rate you buy. And if that's solar or wind, that's not zero carbon because there's upstream cost to that, but it's a fraction of, say, mining with coal. Not this coal, this is special.
Well, this is special.
This is special coal. It really, truly is. Your story absolutely gave me whiplash, narrative whiplash. I was super anti-coal. I heard this story and I was like, okay, if coal should be burned anywhere, it's right there for that purpose.
If this were coal, it would have already been burned. But it's waste. That's why it's
right.
left.
And it's kind of burning anyway.
And it's already exactly right. There we go. It should take you.
But anyway, that's the general thought is just, sorry to take up this time, but the general thought is mine your values, mine in accordance with how you think mining should be, and your only carbon responsibility will be the part of mining you do. You could do that in a very low carbon way. You could do that in a high carbon way. But I believe we've got $16 trillion locked behind ESG constraints. And if you show people a way to hold Bitcoin while doing a very small amount of mining in the way that they see fit, that we give our own ESG pathway that is outside anything coming down from BlackRock or from the SEC, it's a completely bottom-up, market-based, voluntary solution that allows us to say you can hold Bitcoin in a way that's in accordance with your values and your vision of the energy future.
But again, Similar to the California example earlier, like in the real world, like all hash protects the network. Like, it doesn't matter. Like you are benefiting from all hash, not just the green hash. Like to
Absolutely.
That's right.
yeah, like to
You benefit from it, but you don't incentivize it.
You
'cause
feel
you're-
better on the inside.
yeah, exactly. And you can feel again in the long run if these renewable credits run out and these renewable expansion projects aren't being subsidized, people are going to get wrecked from a mining perspective. Because this could lead to a massive misallocation of capital at the end
If
of the
you
day as
get
well.
wrecked while investing 0.5% of your total Bitcoin holdings in green hash, the worst you can get wrecked is 0.5%.
There is no such thing as green hash. A Hashcash SHA-256 hash is a mathematical product. Like, there's no such thing as green hash.
But you gotta get electricity from somewhere.
Yeah.
It's very different getting your electricity from a coal plant. Sorry, not yours, in Kazakhstan, and running on nuclear, say. That's very different from the perspective of the atmosphere.
All right, well, moving on. Jamie and Greg, you guys are members of the Bitcoin Mining Council. Can you comment a bit about what the goals are there and if...
I'm actually not.
Oh, you're not?
I'm not.
Oh.
No, I'm still waiting for the invitation.
All right, well, Jamie, your company's a founding member. Can you tell us a little bit about...
Greg, you're officially invited to the Bitcoin Mining Council, as is anyone who would like to join the Bitcoin Mining Council. It is an open, transparent organization that is really just there to educate, to be transparent, to talk about best practices in the industry. It's nothing more than a group of people that are in the same industry, an industry that happens to be under attack in a very coordinated, very aggressive way, and trying to come together to find a way to be open and transparent and responsive to the attacks.
So, I mean, is that the best way to defend against ESG-based attacks? Just shift the narrative into, Bitcoin is actually green?
It is not an ESG-based organization. That was the kind of the catalyst event that had the industry come together, which is, it's now just over 50% of Bitcoin miners globally are part of the Bitcoin Mining Council, and that's happened in less than a year. It was just the catalyst event. It happened to come out of, well, frankly, when Elon tweeted last May, it became a bit of a crisis moment, and we came together as an industry and formed the council. And I think it's done a really good job, as is indicated by how much of the global hash rate is represented on the council. But it's not about ESG. It's about the industry itself, and we'll face another existential threat tomorrow that won't be an E, it'll be regulation, or it'll be, who knows what it'll be, but now we have a means to get together and talk about how to best respond.
Well, I mean, a council did face some criticism when it was formed because, council sounds a little bit like cartel, it shares a lot of
Because
money.
it starts with a C?
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't really look good for, when we start talking about like miner centralization.
So as an industry, we get to be attacked by a giant coordinated global effort. But to respond, we need, as individuals, to pick up a weapon and individually respond in an uncoordinated way. What do you think is going to happen? It's an existential threat to our industry as a whole. You can't just take it one person at a time. Obviously, it wasn't working.
I'm really glad the Bitcoin Mining Council exists because they give us data, and I'm a fellow at the Bitcoin Policy Institute. That data is extremely helpful. We need even more of it. However, I should also say, I believe in black market hash rate. I think that Bitcoin needs black market hash rate.
Oh, wait, can you define black market hash
believe
rate?
in black market hash rate.
Right.
We don't. We are open. We don't care.
Right. So this is the great thing about Bitcoin, right? It's an open network. Nobody can stop you from firing up a miner wherever you are on whatever power you want, and I love that, and I don't ever want that to end.
Is that what you call black market hash rate, or are you talking about like?
I mean, you're not reporting to anybody. If there is any kind of ESG oversight thing, it's a potential vector for attack, right? It's a potential vector for other kinds of control once you have that information flow. I'm not saying the BMC does that. I'm saying, I'm a paranoid Bitcoiner like the rest of you. Just because I believe in climate change doesn't mean I'm not paranoid. I see ESG still as a possible way to, once you are reporting requirements, then you know where all the hash is coming from. So then if you want to censor transactions, you know where to go. If you want to take over mining and make it state-owned and come in and do a 51% attack, you know where to go. Like, all the information is there. That's why I say black market hash rate always needs to be there to prevent those kinds of centralized attacks. Sorry. I don't think that's incompatible with the BMC. I'm glad the BMC is.
I don't either.
Is it possible that regulatory requirements and disclosure requirements could, drive a greater percentage of the mining share into, black market hash rate?
I'd say a couple things that we haven't said yet.
Okay.
In the past 2 years, I think Bitcoin mining has been cleaned up largely because it's been moved to North America, which is a much cleaner, greener source of energy. So I think Asia is largely unplugged, and a lot of that was much, much dirtier power. So I think without market forces have already done have had a huge role in cleaning up.
Well, China pushing miners out is not really market forces.
Well, it is. But I think it's not said. For everyone in this room, as much as we don't want regulation, maybe don't respect our government, our system of government is still made our capitalist system. We have the best capital markets in the world. The Bitcoin mining industry was financed here because money was allowed to flow into it. And so for that, I'm thankful and will always be. So a little bit of regulation just to keep fraud from happening. Okay, but just preserve, if the US loses our capital markets, that's probably our greatest asset. The reason why you see Elon Musk here or Peter Thiel here, it's because we have capital markets that work. And so we want a little bit of regulation, a little bit of a government voice just to keep things sane, to keep the money flowing. If the money goes away, there's no Bitcoin, there's no mining. Bitcoin would be, $50 a coin. So it's capital and access to capital that makes it all go. So I think with regard to regulation, hey, we ought to make an effort to clean it up. Who doesn't? Even if you're for a less regulation, we should still try to have a cleaner planet.
Bitcoin's been working for 13 years without any mining regulation. The United States, it's fine. People are investing capital and making us more energy efficient via the free market on their own volition. Going to the government and begging for regulation. These people hate us. They hate you. Going and giving them more control is not going to work.
But you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you
what do you mean have your cake and eat it too?
If you're a publicly traded company, you are subject to regulation. When you make the decision to access the capital
I understand
markets,
that, but don't beg for regulation. That's all I'm saying.
Well, just a little bit in the right spot. You don't want to be overregulated. I don't think our government is crazy enough to say, hey, you can use power to run a casino, but you can't use it to mine Bitcoin. Or you can use power to run a data center, or you can't. I don't think they have it in them.
And I don't know who you're seeing that's begging for regulation. Nobody's begging for regulation.
Well, the banks weren't initially begging for regulation, but now they are because they've, entered their incumbent positions. And we see regulatory capture in every industry, and I think...
Yeah, I think...
No, sorry, I thought you meant that miners are begging for regulation.
There was just a comment up here. We like some regulatory clarity, but
regulatory clarity for sure. But
Yeah.
we're not up here begging for regulation.
I think the BMC also, this is also true across a lot of industries. You have an industry group that identifies issues within the industry. So, you've all read these stories. They make a huge impact on Bitcoin's price because they get incredible representation in the media of, some mine in Appalachia where they've placed the miners in a way that the sound echoes for 5 miles away, and then you have neighbors that are just insomniac because they're kept up all night, right? Or whatever, one-off stories of bad actors, of mining operation that comes in and then leaves immediately and leaves serious economic devastation in the wake. Those kinds of stories, as an industry, I'm not in the industry, I'm just a philosopher, But if I were, I would be looking at those stories and just compiling best practices and sharing them and coming up with guidelines for how do we not piss people off in the communities we're in. We've heard some of that on this stage earlier, right? I think that's wonderful. That's kind of cooperation and anticipating the calls for regulation and where they're going to come from, and just getting ahead of that and being good people, just being decent people, right?
Marty, do you have a response to that, or?
No, I just think it's interesting. You're not in the mining industry and you're looking for this clarity. Like if you're in it, you understand the cost, you understand everything. Like somebody who's mining off of natural gas predominantly, people don't understand like the benefits of natural gas. It's been demonized, oil and gas specifically, and we've seen it. I've seen it working with oil and gas companies. A lot of these big companies are afraid to mine Bitcoin because of the ESG narrative. And I lost my train of thought there for a bit, but
we just combat it. I think flare gas mining is the greenest mining on the planet.
And so I'm like with the BMC particularly, like again, I think it's the beginning of a slippery slope where it's like, all right, we're going to get all this information out there, and it's all right. Are you BMC certified? Then it's
We're not. There's no certification.
no, not yet, but it's a slippery slope.
Slippery slope is a fallacy.
If you
I
are,
can tell you it's
if the-
never been discussed.
If the BMC becomes like the predominant interaction with the government of like, hey, we're going to represent the mining industry.
No,
It's,
that is not.
It
on
is.
the table.
It could be. Again,
Or
it's a social
even if-
attack vector.
Sure,
That's what I'm
anything could
saying.
be anything, but that is not the case here.
I mean, if BlackRock shows up with its trillions of dollars and offers, BMC Council or Bitcoin Mining Council members membership, or a listing in their new ESG iShares ETF, I mean then it becomes almost compulsive, right? That it no like. What? Ultimately, it doesn't become a choice. It's not a voluntary thing that you do if either you comply with whatever BMC requires, or you
BMC
don't.
doesn't require anything. Larry might require something.
Right,
That's
Larry
a choice
does.
you make with Larry.
Right, but if Larry is hanging or holding like trillions of dollars in front of your face, you kind
Larry
of.
doesn't get to tell the BMC what to do.
Well, Larry gets to tell companies what they have to do in order to be listed in their iShares ESG ETF.
But apples and oranges, two different conversations. And not every member of the Bitcoin Mining Council is a publicly traded miner. They don't need Larry's money. They don't care about Larry.
Okay.
Don't need Larry, we got Bitcoin.
Okay, then is it conceivable that Bitcoin, or we achieve hyper-Bitcoinization, or Bitcoin goes to the moon, or whatever, by just through free market mechanisms without actually like catering to the people who have money?
I think so.
It's already happening.
Yeah.
Like the institutionalization of the market's already happening. Like if you looked at who the investors were in my IPO, it's the same investors that invest in blue chip, regular companies that aren't in decentralized finance.
Well, you saw Elon Musk, did one tweet, and then the Bitcoin miners all. It was a crisis because he threatened to not accept Bitcoin for Tesla because of environmental concerns.
This is why I'm on stage today. 9 months ago, watched Kevin O'Leary basically attack the fungibility of Bitcoin in order to cater to these people. And I was like, you just don't have to do that. You can invest in Bitcoin, you can hold Bitcoin in a way that has minimal to zero carbon impact, in a way that does not impact fungibility. And I wouldn't put it as catering to these people. I would just put it as just like showing people a simple truth that you can balance one incentive with another. What they do with that information is up to them, but why aren't we at six figures right now? I think it does have to do with this attack. Why isn't Bitcoin $150,000 a coin right now?
Fiat price don't matter.
Fiat price don't matter. I agree with you in the long term. Fiat price don't matter. But it's like, I think it's an artificial block. I see this huge dam between that 16 trillion in ESG locked capital and Bitcoin. A lot of it wants to come here and it can't because it's locked in these weird ESG frameworks and lies from environmentalists, frankly, who don't understand Bitcoin and its impact on the environment. And all we have to do is break that dam, and it's very good for everyone. It's good for the energy transition. It's good for the industry. And I think we have to make it on our terms. I don't think we cater to anybody else. We just tell the truth.
Exactly. Outweigh ESG. It's their problem that they're not allocating to us. We don't need to cater to them to bring them in. Like, everybody's going to need Bitcoin. Like, the world is getting insane. Governments have printed money to a point where they're not going to be able to pay back the debt they accrued. Bitcoin is essential as we transition to the digital age. If ESG wants to sit on the sidelines because they worry about the environment, let them do that. Like, it's not our job to go convince these people. We have, like, that's what Peter Thiel was saying yesterday. We have the truth on our side. And we have the power, like, in terms of objective truths on our side. I don't think we should be catering to these hysterics.
You just need patience and a long time horizon.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
And we need to get the truth out there. I mean, the orange pill is something that everyone gets eventually, but that doesn't mean you don't want to orange pill people. You know, you want to, and it's the same with the green pill. The green pill of realizing Bitcoin's actual relation to the environment, which is complex, which takes a long time to learn. It's not intuitive how grids work, very unintuitive. You know, the narrative that environmentalists have right now, where every electron, you know, that's spent on Bitcoin mining, that does Bitcoin mining, it could have been used for some other useful purpose, is so wrong-headed. We have to undo that narrative and teach people how electricity works. You know, that's hard. Do we have to do that? We could sort of wait and watch them bend the knee 20 years later or whatever, if you want to sort of lever up on the certainty and inevitability of Bitcoin. Or we could just try to tell the truth and bring everybody on board, all of humanity on board, as soon as possible. I'd rather do the latter.
Yeah.
I think we need to find a friendly environmentalist that we can orange pill and then take them on the journey with us let them take us to the rest of their friends.
I agree.
We need to find that guy or girl or they or them.
All right, we only have a few minutes left. Let's assume Alex DeVries, the digiconomist guy who's been launching the environmental attacks on Bitcoin, who says that Bitcoin uses more energy than like all of Denmark or whatever. What do we say to him to orange pill him?
He's never going to be orange pilled. He
So
works for the Dutch
poor.
central bank.
That's one person you say has fun staying poor too. He's a dishonest banker. He's represented all the time in the popular press as a Paris-based economist. I found out he's just like begun his PhD program. He's works for a bank. He never identifies that. He never listed as a conflict of interest. And again, when I get into conversations with him, he's duplicitous and hides the truth about Bitcoin. That's not the case for a large body of scientists and environmentalists who are skeptical about Bitcoin. They're just ignorant, and they haven't gotten to the bottom of it. But we have some dishonest actors, and Alex DeVries is a dishonest actor. If you want to debate me anytime, Alex, you know, I'm up for it.
He's one of the most disingenuous people on the planet.
Okay, well, in the last 2 minutes, there are going to be dishonest people out there. Do we just ignore them and wait till they go away? Like, how do we get the upper hand over the dishonest actors?
Tell the truth.
All right.
Engage, debate.
Yeah, you can tell the truth, but it's already, like, we in this room are not going to win the battle that ESG isn't good. It's like that wave is cresting on top of us.
We're going to destroy ESG. It's destroying itself already.
It's worth the fight. But if you're already a public company, subject to regulation, like, I don't have the energy to, you know, even with your help, I don't have the energy to fight these idiots. It's like, so what do? You try to green as much as you can. Try to, you know, recognize that the ESG efforts are actually ruining the grid. Our grid is already unstable anyway, and we're adding all this intermittent source of power to it. It's like, hey guys, your crazy ESG dream is wrecking the grid. So because we don't want to live in a place that has intermittent source, you know, power availability, we're going to help you by letting our Bitcoin mine be turned off when your wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. So we can help keep prices low. So I think we're already doing that, and that's going to show, you know, like the benefit that we bring that wouldn't be brought otherwise.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You can't. To me, I don't have the energy to battle it because. Hey, I'd rather just say, you know, it's almost as easy just to fix these problems that ESG is creating, and hey, make these dummies that refuse to take to understand facts. Say, well, you know what? We could leave you alone, and you'd be sitting in the dark, but we're going to help you.
Yeah, no, I think this is how we destroy ESG. I mean, you get out there on the narrative, you say, here's what we're doing. What you're doing is making us materially worse off. I mean, AJ Scalia and Drew Armstrong from Cathedra. I think their shareholder newsletter their shareholder annual letter did an incredible job of laying out the landscape of the energy sector and how Bitcoin fits into that. And that's a piece of content from a publicly traded company that says, hey, we don't think we should go along with this ESG narrative. We think it's making things worse off. Here's the solution: Bitcoin, plugging into grids, creating a load balance mechanism, sucking up off-grid resources. But again, like we have examples of publicly traded companies catering to ESG. Marathon, they just announced that they're shutting down their operations at that coal plant in Montana. And that coal plant in Montana that mining operation is employing an insane amount of Native Americans in that area. And like it's doing an incredible service for the S side of things, if you believe in ESG, but they're shutting it down because they're worried about the E. And again, that's an example of the industry catering to ESG, that if that trend continues and picks up, it's not going to be good for the North American mining industry.
Can I just say the last word?
Yep.
Bitcoin Policy Institute is this think tank where I'm a fellow. We are trying to tell the truth. Margot, who you just heard on the last panel, and I are trying to do basic research. We need basic peer-reviewed research. That newsletter is great, but we need more than that. We need to engage at the academic level in the journals and do real research, get it peer-reviewed, get it published, and get that information to lawmakers and people on Wall Street. There's no shortcut.
All right, thank you, Troy. And thank you, Jamie, Greg, and Marty.